Don't pick up that doggone phone the first thing you do. Don't start there, because that's the hook. Once you get that hook in you, you're done, right? You're sabotaged. You're not going to do anything else. If you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. And that's not selfish. That's putting that oxygen mask on, right? So the more that we take care of ourselves and give ourselves that time, or our family, right? Change is happening. We are living in the most disruptive era ever, especially in business. And change, it's coming, it's here, it's not going to stop. So how do you embrace change?
Welcome back to the show. Today we're joined by Todd Bertsch to talk about leading with intentionality and presence. So Todd is a coach and leader, and he specializes in helping people move past perfectionism and embrace progress. So today we're going to break down his SPARK framework. We're going to get into topics of curiosity, mindset, action, growth, and impact. And we're going to discuss practical ways to manage your time and energy through blocking out time and then tackling projects. If you've been looking for a roadmap to unlock your inner spark and build more effective standards in your work and relationships, this episode's for you. Let's dive in with Todd Bertsch.
Welcome to the Everyday Leader Podcast. Leadership is a choice. Join me, Matt, and my co-hosts Drew and Tate each episode as we break down how to lead powerfully in your family, team, and organization.
Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Everyday Leader Podcast. Excited to have Todd Bertsch with us today. He's a dynamic keynote speaker and entrepreneur. He ran a marketing agency for a really long time, and we connected recently. I'm excited to just hear and pick his brain a little bit about leadership and the lessons he's learned throughout his career, and appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, and we'll dive into who Todd is in just a second, but to kick things off, we feel the world has so many different definitions of what leadership means, and it can mean so many different things to different people. How do you define leadership, Todd?
Yeah, good question. And you're right. I always ask that question on my show as well, like define leadership in one word. And people usually struggle with that because leadership is made up of so many different things, right? But for me and my experience being lessons learned, failures, mistakes, I would say intentionality is that one word. Being truly intentional in everything that you do, how you show up, how you react under pressure, and really what you bring to the table every day. That communication, that clarity, that consistency is really important. So I think overall it's just being intentional and being present in every single interaction, whether that's with your team, your prospects, or your clients.
Awesome. I think, I don't know if I'm making this up, Matt, but I feel like that's a word, Tate, one of our other co-hosts, he's not on today, but I know that's a word of his that he loves, being intentional. So.
Yeah, he frequently talks about what's the intent, right? Because it's a big part of how the leadership confusion happens in the world, right? Is it's like you could technically be leading an effort, a charge, whatever, and it's not a very good intent, not a very useful intent. So, yeah, it's fascinating. Intentionality.
Yeah, and I think what happens, one of the problems or challenges that I see really just in society, because if you think about it, we're all leaders, right? If you're a parent, you're a leader. If you're a coach of any sports, so we're all really leaders. We all have the opportunity to lead. But the challenge is we're running so fast and we pack our days in at work and when we get at home, especially if we have kids that are involved in sports, and we're just going. There's no buffer, so there's no time. So the challenge when you have things set up that way, you're just reacting. And you're not really being intentional because you don't have the space. You need to have that space to pause, reflect, take it in.
Yeah, so as you're saying that, just talking about ball games and being busy, Matt's done a really good job of lately. If I've called him in the evening to say, "Hey, can't talk now; it's family time,"
Mm.
and it's really easy not to be intentional, though. It's really easy not to let the schedule, to let life take over, and not lead or have intention in your life. So I
Yeah,
like
and I think we could stay there for a minute. I love that, Matt. You've chosen to put up barriers. And I think one of the biggest challenges as a leader is being able to say no. Um, Typically, leaders are extremely resourceful, and when you're
Well,
resourceful, people reach out to you. And
yeah, right. And they typically care, right? Like they want to
yeah,
help people, they want to be
oh,
available, they want to be like effective and
all the
influential.
things.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. But, you know, if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of anybody else. And that's not selfish. That's putting that oxygen mask on, right? So the
Yeah.
more that we take care of ourselves and give ourselves that time, or our family, right, then we can pour back in 10 times into everybody else. And that's a lesson learned. And that's difficult as a small business owner. You're wearing many hats. You're in startup mode. You're working, you're burning the candle on both ends. You might have some young kids, and that can be a difficult thing, but you need somebody to be that accountability piece to check you and say, and maybe that's your partner, your spouse. My wife's done it. Say, hey, Todd, I need you. I need you here. I need your help. I'm like, thank you. I'm just caught up. I wasn't being intentional about not being there or showing up or helping. I'm just trying to literally put food on the table. And, it's easy to get caught up. So yeah, putting those barriers in place. I have a friend of mine who owns a very large construction company. He calls it blocking and tackling.
Yeah.
Really, really leveraging your schedule, like literal schedule or application, whatever you use, Google or Outlook, to manage that time. I used to put blocks in, literal blocks, spend time with Presley, my daughter, and my wife would make fun of me. I'm like, well, that's because it's going to happen. I'm being, you
Yeah.
talk about intentionality, and maybe it's a little geeky, but no, I mean, I tracked it. I have a spreadsheet. I track how much time I spend because I want to make sure I'm getting that time, and I want to. So
Yeah. Well, it's
again,
interesting because I think I know Kelsey has mentioned to me before, like, oh, I'm flattered that lunch with me is on your calendar.
mm,
Almost like, do we really have to be on your calendar for us to spend time together? And while that's not entirely true, there is something really valuable and beautiful
mhm,
about the intentionality around like, hey, this is something I'm committed to, and I really want to make sure that nothing else is going to try to impede that. And so
mhm,
obviously it's not like the only time you spend time with them, and it is cool to set that intentionality and schedule that type of time. It just shows that like, hey, this is something that gets my priority at that time. It's
mhm,
interesting that you mentioned blocking and tackling. I was with Pat Murphy, the manager of the Brewers, once, and that's how he described his leadership on a Major League Baseball team. He said, "I just block and tackle."
mm,
He's like, "I just try to create holes that people can run through," and I'm like,
right.
"That is so cool! Like that's a great way to think about leadership." So, anyways, I thought of that when you mentioned block and tackle. It really is uh, a cool concept when we consider what that looks like.
Yeah, and I think I'm writing a note here because it made me think about. I'm laughing because that example's happened before, where I used to have an employee who has been with me for a long time, and I would be that guy sending those emails out, at 10 o'clock at night or on the weekends. And she would always get on me and say, hey, Todd, like, do you know the tone that's setting? And I never really thought about it. It's just me, right? It's my business. So I'll work when I have the time, the slots. And it made me think about, okay, maybe I am setting the wrong tone. Just because that's a time for me, I can send that email. Now you can even, use leverage Outlook to, schedule it to be sent at an appropriate work time, right? So you're not setting the tone for, hey, I can just email, text at any point and you should be available. So I think you bring up a really good point, Matt. I've learned that lesson and I've changed. I wasn't thinking about it because again, I'm just running. I'm thinking about me, me, me. And it does, there's implications. So again, being intentional about every single thing you do, it has an impact one way or another.
Yeah. I'm curious your take, Todd, on, so when I think about like what Drew brought up about, like, I tell him no, like, you can count on me not to be on that call or on that meeting because
Mhm.
I've already given my commitment to something else. I think of that in terms of, uh, it's just agreements to me. Like, I have
Mm.
agreements with my kids, I have agreements with Kelsey, and they're not perfect, right? Like,
Mm.
there's places to upgrade them or clarify them or revisit them for sure. And curious, if, like, what does that word mean to you? How have you seen agreements be effective in your work? It's something we feel really strongly about. I'm just curious your take on that idea of creating agreements with people, even maybe rather than barriers so much. It's like just clear agreements.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, I've never quite worded it like that. Um, but I think there's a general tone that's set, kind of the same thing, where we have mutual working relationship, and we just know that's,
Yeah,
it's agreed upon that that's how we're going to do it, or that you can just run with something. I'm gonna give you those wings and trust that you're gonna handle it in the way that you should.
I've
yeah,
never thought about it, Matt, but it's something we could probably also define it as a standard.
Mm.
yeah.
Possibly it's just this idea that you're not
What's a fair
two
ball and what's
sides
a
aren't
foul ball?
right.
Yeah,
Yeah, two sides
Okay.
aren't living with just some undefined expectation that brings unhappiness or frustration because I thought one thing and you thought another. It's like, no, there's a clear agreement, there's a
Mm-hmm.
clear standard, there's a clear way that we do
Mm-hmm.
things, and we know where each other stand.
Yeah,
So,
I like that. The standard. Yep. Mm-hmm. I love it.
um, Todd, before we get too far, we're having a really good conversation. Tell our listener about you. Who is Todd? Why does Todd doing what he's doing right now in the world? I know you've also got a podcast.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a book coming out. You've got a framework that you teach. But yeah, tell our listener, I guess, a little bit about you, Todd.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate the opportunity. Lots of irons in the fire as I'm listening to you go through them. But all good. Again, very intentional. So yeah, I'm a traditional graphic designer. That is my education. I'm a little bit older, so when the internet came out, that's when I was graduating. I jumped on that bandwagon and made that my focus in my career. So I've been designing and developing websites for close to 30 years, digital marketing. And I created a company in 2009, Evolve Marketing, still going. I got a team of 10 people right now, amazing crew. It took a long time to get there, but I have an amazing team, and they essentially run that company without me, which is a great place to be in. A great place to be in. And COVID happened, and it was a time of reflection, like for many people. And we came back to the office, so to speak, and literally nobody came back. And it gave me a moment to pause and really think about what's important to me and purpose. I'm at a point in my life where I felt like, I really needed to be doing something a little bit different. I love people. I love connecting and I love helping people. And I wasn't getting that in my current business anymore. And again, I love my people and my clients. It just wasn't filling my cup. So I pivoted. And last year, I made the choice to really empower my team to run my company. And now I'm out keynote speaking, mental fitness coaching. And as you mentioned, Drew, I have a podcast as well called The Bolt, which is focused on personal growth and leadership. So that's what I'm doing right now. All my work is based on kind of a core concept of igniting your spark. You can see that on the shirt here. You can see it on the mug. So I'm a marketing branding guy, so I'm going to have it anywhere I can. But really where that stems from is I believe that every organization, every person has a spark. And unfortunately, over time, right? Over time, fear, burnout, self-doubt, stress dims that spark. And I know it because I've lived it. I've lived it. I've been stuck. I've been in a comfort zone. I've been full of self-doubt. I've played it safe when I knew, that I was really meant for more. But what's cool is I've lived the other side of that. I've lived the transformation that comes from choosing curiosity over fear, growth over comfort, and action over hesitation. And through all these conversations, I've had hundreds of conversations on my podcast, research, books, podcasts, conferences, you name it. A theme emerged and a pattern. And that's what I've always looked at in business is what are the patterns, good patterns, trends. And the pattern was that the most successful people, leaders, global leaders, do a couple of things they have in common. They're extremely curious, they're in a growth mindset, and they're lifelong learners. And they're very consistent with small shifts throughout the year. So that's what I've adopted. I went through a major transformation, and now I'm bringing that to leaders and teams to help them ignite their spark. Because let's be honest, guys, you can see it on the news, you can read about it, you can listen to it. Change is happening. We are living in the most disruptive era ever, especially in business. And change, it's coming, it's here, it's not going to stop. So how do you embrace change? How can you see change as an opportunity and overcome the fear and discomfort? And that's what my work is all about, is educating people on why we're built the way we are and that we're not broken and that we've been there before. We've been through change. We all have the spark. It just gets dimmed over time, especially as you get older. You ebb and flow through life, and depending on your season of life, you might be comfortable, cozy, complacent. And that's not a good place to be in. That's a slow death, to be honest. So getting out of that unstuckness, that's what I help people do. Reignite, get back out there and live your best life. Because when you live your best life, then you're serving everybody else 10x. That's your family, your colleagues, your direct reports, your community, your church, whatever's important to you. Again, it goes back to you got to take care of yourself. But the key is you have to make that choice. You have to make that choice. And that's what I help people with, because that choice, it's tough. It seems change is scary. It feels overwhelming. Oh my gosh, how am I going to do that? How am I going to embrace something new? The fear, survival takes over. And that's where we just say, hey, we're just going to take small shifts here. We're going to start with one thing. And we're going to build that momentum, build that consistency, that new habit. And then you start to get that dopamine rush. You say, oh, well, this isn't so bad. I've done this before. Next thing you know, you're a machine. You're living the best life ever.
Yeah. Would you say, just on that last thing you said, we've talked on a recent podcast actually about how just do it doesn't work for a lot of people. What have you seen around that? Like you mentioned kind of like these very small actions.
Mm-hmm.
Share a little bit more about that. Because I still think that a lot of people listening have things that they say they want, or they say they need, or they say they should be doing. And at the end of the day, they didn't do them again. So curious your take on what do those small actions look like? How do people build that momentum? What does that look like from your experience?
Yeah, great question. It's insight, then action. So you need to learn first about who you are, what your purpose is. What's in it for me, everybody says. And what's your goal? What's most important to you? Every time I lead a coaching cohort, I ask the same question, like what is most important to you? And 95% of the time, it's family. So if family is what's most important to you, then how can you serve them better, right? So if that's the lens, then you can start to figure out the pieces. And the pieces are just starting with something small. A small gratitude practice in the morning is one of the best ways to kick things off, whether that's journaling, whether that's light meditation or prayer, which is what I do. So I have a 5-minute gratitude practice in the morning, a little meditation with some PQ repping, which is my positive intelligence practice, and then some prayer, which mixes in some gratitude. And that's a wonderful way to start the day. Because when you're focused on what you have, you're not focused on what you don't have. And then you can start to really head out and get things done. So there are a number of small little things. It's getting people back into the practice of feeling some discomfort, which is anything new. But again, that reminder of who you've always been and just tapping back into it so that it's there, it was there, you've done it, that reminder. And maybe that's tapping back into that inner child. Because a lot of times that's what it takes. It's a little reflection. I have people just take 5 minutes, close your eyes, and think about a moment in time when you were a child, when you were truly just full of bliss, happiness, an explorer, right? Just extremely curious on the playground, on the baseball field, which is what it is for me. I have a picture that I keep close to me. It's me in my baseball uniform, all pimped out with the gloves, the batting, the wristbands, the fancy spikes, even back in the 80s. But that brings me joy because there was nothing more that I looked forward to than a baseball game. And if it rained, man, I was crying for days. And it sounds like you guys are baseball guys, so I'm sure you can appreciate that reflection. But again, so it just goes back to that reminder. And I feel like the inner child is one that we can tap into that we, as we get into adulthood, we forget about. And that's where that spark was. So just tapping back into that and remembering, oh man, I can get that again, I can get that again. So I don't know if that truly answers your question, Matt, but it just goes back to somehow reminding yourself who you've always been, finding that vision and what's important to you. It's not, just that I want to lose weight, right? It's about, I want to be healthier. So that I can be around for my family, so that I can watch my daughter walk down the aisle and I can meet my grandkids. Now that's something that everybody can hold on to, right? That's a vision that I can use to really push me to make some changes, but start small. Atomic Habits is one of my favorite books by James Clear. And, he says, if you want to start running, first day, you just get your shoes out and set them by the door. You do that for a couple of days, and then you put your shoes on. And then the next day you go walk for 2 minutes, and then you start jogging for a couple miles, right? So if you're going to run a marathon, you're not just going to go out, if you're not a runner, and just go run a marathon. That's extremely hard. You're going to build up to it. So
will you just walk us through real quick? Like you mentioned kind of the way you start each day.
Mm-hmm.
Really practically, not hypothetically, what does that look like? And I feel like it would serve our listeners to know, like, okay, I could do that, or I could do a piece of that. What does that look like? I mean, walk us through just like when that happens, where that happens, how long it happens. What is your family doing when you're doing, like just walk us through what that looks like on a really practical everyday basis.
Yeah. The life of Todd. All right. And this is a work in progress, right? It's a whip. It's constantly tweaking and iterating based on something new that I learn or something that I want to focus on and be intentional about. I'm definitely a growth nerd. I'm trying different things. But right now, I have a morning routine. And here's a key piece for everybody. If you do one thing, do this one thing, or don't do this one thing. Don't pick up that doggone phone the first thing you do. If that's what you use for your alarm clock, stop, go buy an old school $5 cheap alarm clock from Target or Kohl's and use that as your alarm. So you don't have a reason, right? If you need to get your phone, pull it off the charger, but don't look at it. Keep it face down. Don't let that light hit you in the face. Don't start there because that's the hook. Once you get that hook in you, you're done, right? You're sabotaged. You're not going to do anything else. The dings, the pings, the emails, the text, you're done. So that is one important thing that I've started to do. over a couple of years now. And one of the keys was I read Robin Sharma's book, The 5 a.m. Club. If you haven't read that, if you're not familiar with it, highly, highly recommend it. A great, great read. And it transformed my morning routine. My morning routine sucked, honestly. And I felt like I was running pretty lean and mean on everything else, but that morning routine just was not tight. Again, it started with that phone. I get in and then boom, I want to get right to work because those hours are the best hours of the day for me. I'm not getting pulled by so many people. I got an hour of me time, and that's when I'm the most creative and I can really handle all those difficult challenges, that need my analytical brain. But in reality, now I'm using that time for me. So I get up, I walk the dog, bring him back, and then I might go for another mile. No podcast, no radio. I just want the sounds of nature. And what's cool is the earlier you can get up. Now, easy for me. I get up, I'm not in the 5 a.m. club. I'm in the 6 a.m. club. But the earlier you can get up, there's less distractions, less literal noise with cars, transportation. So you can really, depending on where you live, even I live kind of close to the city, I can still hear the birds, right? And I can still hear sounds of nature, which is calming for me. So I can set the tone. And as I'm walking, I can maybe think about my day and what I'm going to do, what I'm going to accomplish, set those priorities. And then I come back and I meditate. I meditate for whatever. It could be 5, 8, 10 minutes. Really depends on the day.
Todd, are you sitting down on the ground? Like, I think sometimes when people hear meditating, they're like, you got your fingers like this or whatever. And you're like,
Yep.
what does that look like for you? Are you sitting down? Are you standing up? Is it sitting in a chair?
Great point. So I'm going to pull something out here. Oh, ruined my bookshelf. All right. You guys see this. This book changed everything for me. Emily Fletcher, Stress Less, Accomplish More. So this is not a book on meditation, but it is. And what it did for me, I was the same way, man. I'm like, meditation was on my list for literally 2 years, and I just couldn't pull myself to do it because I'm such a perfectionist. I'm like, I'm going to do it wrong. You got to be crisscross applesauce with insets going and candles and And no, Emily said, look, just find a quiet space. Who cares how you do it? Just sit in a quiet space, be still, and just try to be one with your thoughts. And you're going to wander, and that's part of it. That's building that mental muscle. That's the exercise. And pull yourself back. But just calming down, just being in a space that's quiet and a point of reflection is what it is for me. So yes, I'm sitting, but there's no special pillow or music or smells or sounds. I'm just really being one with myself. And then I go into a little prayer and then into my gratitude practice. True, authentic gratitude for what I'm grateful for, which is a lot of the same stuff, my family, my health, so on and so forth. And then other things like being able to have the show, being able to meet Drew, a couple weeks ago, being grateful for those connections and those people that have been brought into my life so that I can be reminded of that and those small things that are really important to me. So that's how I start my day. And that's awesome. A great way to start it. A lot of people work out. That's not part of my routine. I work out at the end of the day. So that's kind of my bookend. So I work out after I'm done at the office around 4 or 5 o'clock. And then I end my routine with another meditation practice, which is the positive intelligence. It's called PQ reps. I'm building my mental muscle. And again, more prayer and reflection. And I do that before I go home. So I'm setting the tone. I'm clearing my mind so that I can be in a good space and be fully present when I get home with the fam.
No, I love that. And just for our listener that's hearing this, I love what you're sharing, Todd, because there's an intentionality and it's not perfection. There's a big difference. This could be while you're driving. This could be while you're standing in the shower, right? I mean, there's just a lot of ways to do this intentionally that don't require you to upend your whole life and build a shed outside that, right, to your point, right? And have all the stuff. Like, I think that's a beautiful thing is that the intentionality, like you can create this without any external stuff or disruption. So I love
Yeah,
that.
you're absolutely
It's
right.
not about perfection. It's not about any of that. It's about the intentionality of just creating that time. That's
Yes,
really great.
please. Yeah, you brought up a really good point. Please do not focus on perfection. That was one of my worst traits that I had for years. In fact, I had it on my business card, AKA the perfectionist. Now I cross it out. And and it was a great icebreaker. People say, "Oh, I'm a perfectionist too," and it was great until I started doing deep work. I'm like, "Wait a minute, this is a barrier. This is preventing me from really being amazing, because there's never perfection. It's the journey, to
Yeah.
get to somewhere and then continuing to grow." So yeah, I don't believe in perfection anymore. And the one thing that I'd say too is everybody's different. Find what works for you. And depending on your season in life, if you have young kids or if you have a new job that's very demanding, right? It's going to ebb and flow, but just have something, have a routine, build those habits, and then continually test. We're just scientists. We're just trying to experiment, what works best for you. But I would highly recommend getting in a little gratitude practice, whatever that is, whatever that looks like for you.
Yeah.
It's game changing. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It's great.
All right, Todd. So I've got a kind of a question on that. Well, and to give some context before I ask the question, we often talk about the importance of sometimes before you lead others, you've got to be able to lead yourself.
Mm-hmm.
If we kind of look at that through that lens, how do you go from being the business owner who is sending emails at 10 o'clock at night and probably out of a sense of perfection, I'm guessing,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
that, hey,
Mm-hmm.
things have to be perfect, things have to get done,
Mm-hmm.
to, now that business runs itself without me. And there are people I've empowered to do that. Like what's that process look like to go? Cause I feel like a lot of business owners, a lot of small entrepreneurs, they feel like the business never stops and they can't walk away from it and they can't stop.
Yep.
And so how does that process happen where you go from, hey, I'm stuck in this trap of perfection of being involved in my day to day, where it's like, hey, I'm now allowing this business to run without me there so I can fulfill a greater purpose and mission that I have. How does that happen?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Drew. I wish I had a silver bullet for you, or a magic bottle. Yeah, it's going to be a little bit different for everybody. I think the key is just getting there, finding out what works for you. For me, I had to go through a lot of deep work, a lot of transformation to get there. But I will say this, the one key component is being open and curious. Because when you're open and curious, then you're more likely to get feedback. And when you get feedback from your spouse or your employees, or maybe you're doing an ENPS survey within your employees, and looking at that feedback and learning from it, which is what I did. And there were, again, I was looking for patterns, and the patterns were saying that my people weren't happy, and I saw them transitioning in and out. I had this revolving door. So I started to notice that there were things in my life that weren't working the way that I was hoping they would, and that I needed to make some change. So there was a trigger for me. But again, I had to make that choice. I had to recognize that there was something wrong. So for me, it was going through positive intelligence. So during COVID, someone reached out to me on Zoom, an executive coach who was certified in the program. And it seemed a little woo-woo to me, but I said, you know what do I have to lose? And that program literally changed my life, changed the way I lead, live, and changed my business. And then I ended up having my leaders go through the program as well. And now I'm a coach because I believe in it so much. And what that program did for me, guys, is it built a pause button, and it gave me freedom. It gave me self-command and freedom. Freedom of my thoughts, my emotions, my actions. I was a knee-jerker. I had a temper. I had no patience, and that did not serve me well, and a perfectionist. So I had a lot of really bad traits looking back now. So that's been a work in progress and continues to be. But again, I think it goes back to just being open and curious, being in that growth mindset that I am not perfect and I just want to learn. I just want to be 1% better every single day. So how do I get there? I would highly recommend hiring a coach. I'm not saying hire me, but and it can be costly, but I think everybody needs a coach, right? We had guidance counselors in high school. I think every company, as part of the benefits package, we all have accessibility to a coach of some sorts. We all need somebody to get off our island, talk to vent, and then if someone has some coaching tactics or skills that they can actually coach you through becoming, again, the best version of yourself and just starting with that one thing and getting better. So that's what it was for me, but it was a process. It all started in COVID, but again, it does come back to just, I was open to the idea of getting feedback and making some change.
That's awesome.
Open and curious.
Yeah.
Again, like if you have a limitation come up as you're listening to this and it's like, well, coaches are for weirdos or rich people or right. Some of the, which is fine. Or if it's a legit constraint right now, what I love is that it doesn't cost anything to be curious. Like that is like, you've mentioned it several times. It's a beautiful foundational thing for us to all embrace more. It doesn't cost you anything to just ask questions, to look at a situation and say, I wonder what there is to learn here, either inside or outside or, with other people. So I love that. It's really reassuring. Like it doesn't cost anything to
and it costs little to nothing to learn. You've talked about that too. I mean, you've referenced multiple books that have been impactful and life-changing. And when I think of some of my greatest mentors have been $5 on Amazon for an Audible or a book that has taught me principles that have been life-changing. And to your point, it's you learn and then you act. I think you phrased it differently.
Insight
Todd,
before action.
Yeah, insight before action. And so, I Matt and I both believe in coaching too. And if you're in that position where it's like, I don't think I can hire a coach, you can start by being curious. You can start by picking up a good book, finding good podcasts. Yeah. Great.
One of the beautiful things about society today is that you have unlimited resources. In fact, it could be fatigue just figuring out which ones are authentic or honest or reputable, right? So find somebody, but you're right. It goes back to, and that is the first principle in my Spark framework is curiosity. And that seems to be the through line to every conversation I have on my show with leaders. We go through, and it always circles back to being curious. Because when you're curious, you're not assuming. So imagine coming into every conversation, whether it be with, a colleague or a client or a prospect, just being extremely curious. What if? What am I missing here? What else could be true? Open-ended questions, not directing somebody, but truly looking for insight. That opens up a different space. That creates psychological safety. Now people like, oh, they're invited into that conversation. And the guard comes down. Now we can have an authentic conversation. And you know what? Curiosity leads to trust. And if we're being a great leader, the key is to get that trust from your team, and then they will follow you to war. But you have to build that trust. That doesn't earn that trust. That doesn't happen overnight. But being curious, it is our superpower as human beings. But sometimes we lose it. And we get complacent. And that's why I help people ignite that spark. And that is the ignition point, is curiosity.
Todd, what's the rest of the Spark framework?
Yeah, so it's 5 principles: curiosity, which is the spark, as I mentioned; mindset, which is the fuel; action, which is the fire; and then you have all those come into growth, which is essentially the outcome and your spark realized. And then we end with impact, which is the light. And that's the beautiful thing where you get to light the way for others see that ripple effect within your organization, your family, your church, whomever you're serving. That is the goal to me, is being able to have that impact, to be that servant leader, to really pour into everybody else. It's contagious, man. It's contagious. But that is the framework. That is the framework based on neuroscience, psychology, decades of research, and looking at some of our top leaders in the country.
Todd, is your book all about that framework, Ignite Your Spark?
It is, yes, sir. That is
And
the
when's that come out?
chapter. That is the chapter outline. 2026.
Awesome.
Work in progress.
Sometime this year.
Sometime this year. Absolutely.
Awesome.
No, making good progress. Some things have birthed out of it, which is really cool. So I'm just, the old me, perfectionist, would have been hung up and I need this checklist, I need this done by this or that. And now I'm just really embracing the journey and letting it kind of be organic, which has been fun. It's a different way to live.
It's awesome. Well, this has been so good, Todd. Wow. Thank you for the, sharing the insights, and your experience has been so good. How can people find you, or what's the best way for people to understand further about you and what you're creating and what you're working on?
Yeah, check out toddbertsch.com. My last name is Bertsch, very German spelling. toddbertsch.com. Check out my services. I'm very active on LinkedIn, but I'm also on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. So would love to connect with anybody. That's part of my mission, my goal, to connect with 3 to 5 new people every week, have a Zoom chat. One of the things that I love in life is just to learn about other people's journey and their story. That's what fuels me, and making that connection with other humans, especially those like you guys who have a similar mindset, good core values. So, but yeah, check me out. I'd love to connect.
Yeah, we'll make sure we put that in the show notes. So if you want to find Todd, check below, and we'll get you connected to him. Matt, any last thoughts?
No, Todd, thanks so much, man. This is it's been really great. I am committed to going home and being more curious and asking more questions, especially without the word why, because I found that sometimes why can be weaponized and disguised as curiosity, it's still just full of judgment.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's a really great point. One word can make a huge difference.
yeah.
Absolutely. Now, this has been great, guys. I appreciate it. I felt like you were feeding me softballs. Let's keep the baseball reference going. But we're very aligned. Appreciate it. And look forward to continuing our conversation. Drew Norton will be on the Bolt podcast here in a few weeks, so check that out as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Looking forward to it, Todd. Well, thanks for joining today, and to our listener, today's the day.
Thanks for joining us on the Everyday Leader podcast. If you're ready to take your leadership journey even further, subscribe to our weekly newsletter for more insights and practical tips. And don't forget to connect with us on Instagram to stay a part of our growing community. Just follow the links in the show notes. If this episode impacted you, please help us spread the word and share the link with a friend from wherever you're listening.